Hello, everybody. BEEMANDEV live stream BLS009. Show and tell with Chau Tran. Chau, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for being on. Maybe you can tell a little bit about yourself to the viewers.
Sure. So my name is Chau, C-H-A-U. If you watch The Hangover, you probably know how to pronounce my name. I am currently working as a software engineer for Swimland. A lot of Angular developers probably know Swimland through their open source products like Ngx Charts, Ngx Data Table. So I've been working with Angular for 3 years, exclusively with Angular for the past 3 years. Very passionate about TypeScript. So and I have a little bit of background on .NET. So that's why I'm on here today talking about my Automapper in TypeScript, which is inspired from the .NET Automapper.
Awesome. Yeah. When I tweeted this out yesterday, Yuri Stroomfloner was the first one to say, hey, this looks familiar to .NET.
Yep.
And I think that was intentional.
Yep, that's my goal.
Yeah.
I tried to keep it as close to the API as possible.
Very cool. And yeah, so I think for that part, it's already mission accomplished for your Automapper. So yeah, a few things today we're going to look at, but it's basically some of, I would maybe say a reincarnation of my API, but then with REST instead of GraphQL.
Correct.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I would say let's dive right in. If you can share your screen,
yep.
I'll make it bigger. And for those of you, let's do that right now. You can follow Chau on Twitter on NART1410. Now, actually, funny thing is when I first started following you on Twitter, started seeing you, I was a bit confused with your username because it was like.
So that Nart is C Tran backwards.
Yeah. At some point I was like, okay, now I.
Okay. Yep.
So definitely give Chau a follow on Twitter. And with that out of the way, we should be able to see your screen. Yeah, there we go.
All right. Okay. So first of all, Automapper in TypeScript is an open source, of course, on GitHub. So the link is github.com/nart/mapper. There are currently many Automappers in TypeScript already, but I'm going to go into why I created my own in a little bit. So today we're going to explore the post REST API. So if you're familiar with the Pangstack repo of beeman, you probably know what we're going to do. So I'm going to show the interaction with the API through the Swagger UI. I was planning to have the Angular front end as well, but I didn't have enough time to finish that. So yeah. I'm going to rely on the Swagger UI to show you the interaction with the API and how Automapper plays.
But there will be Angular code on the screen.
Yep, there will be, because we have to show the generation code to actually sync the models between the front end and the back end.
Right. Okay, cool. So I think, so one of the things, the Pangstack is Prisma, Angular, Nest, Ngx, and GraphQL. Now in this setup, we've changed Prisma with Mongoose. So that's our data access layer. Angular case stays the same, Ngx stays the same, Nest stays the same, and then GraphQL goes with Swagger. So
yep,
you could say it's like the Mangs, M-A-N stack. So yeah, cool. Let's dive into it. Let's take a look at the project.
Yep. So the agenda is pretty straightforward. We're gonna dive into the code to see like the setup, the structure of the code first, like very basic Nest.js. But then we're gonna look into what is Automapper and why is Automapper, and then we're gonna look into how to set up Automapper with Netgas, and then we're gonna see everything in action.
Awesome. Yeah, perfect.
Yes. So the first thing is this is the code. I have a WebStorm here with the NX workspace. So first of all, I have the API application, which is my Netgas application. You can see that there's this app module, very basic, straightforward Netgas app, where you just import all of the module from your libs right here.
Yep.
So let's go through here. I have the Automapper module with mapper. We're gonna go back to this after I introduce the Automapper. I have the config module, so to manage the environment variables. I have the typegoose module. So typegoose, I use typegoose, which is a wrapper around mongoose, but it works with classes, so it works very well with Netgas. So I use typegoose to connect to my database, and then I have these module, which is security authentication and some part of my REST API, the entities of the REST API.
Right, and this is what we're implementing here is a simple blog where a user can have various posts. Each post has an author, has multiple comments, and a comment has an author as well.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, next is the main.ts, so the entry file of a Nest application, where you create the application from app module. These are just arbitrary. I just grabbed the app config from the, again, app configuration, which is provided by the API config module. These part is just set up some middleware. Right. And the Swagger part is right here, which we set up the Swagger doc options. We set some title, description, and version. You can have, of course, you can always have these version from the package.json version.
Right.
Add server. So if you look at the Swagger UI, you have the servers right here. You can always set up multiple servers to target like HTTP or HTTPS in different environments. Yeah, that's up to you. So right now I just have one local server for development API. And then I have add better auth. So I'm going to use token-based authentication. So I have to provide that to Swagger. So I have a way to provide my token.
Yeah.
And then I just build. So this will build a base Swagger doc for me. And then I use a create document. I pass in the application that was created and based on the app module. So Swagger module knows where to look, where to scan all the controllers in your applications. And then you pass in the options so that will return to you the Swagger doc. This is actually a JSON file that will get served by Swagger module. And with setup, it's going to serve the UI, which is the Swagger UI. And it also serves the JSON file at /JSON or -JSON, which is right here.
Yeah. So, and for those of you who are not familiar, Swagger is, if I say it correctly, basically a way to document your REST API.
Correct.
And add typing information and return types and all that jizz.
Yep.
And this is what you can use to then generate code for instance, your front end.
We're going to go back and forth between the code and the Swagger UI to look at how things set up and how things is displayed or is being used on by the Swagger UI.
Perfect. Yeah.
So, all right. So that's just a base setup of the Nest application right now. We're going to go into just one simple or sample module that contains an entity. So we know how we will see how typegoose, or we provide that model to typegoose to, I guess, construct your database models.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm gonna take the post right here. So the post, we have an API post module. So this is like the entry point of the post, everything related to post. And first thing is I'm going to import the module.for feature. So this way is the typegoose way of providing the models. Basically the schema, if you're familiar with the term schema. So this is just typegoose way of providing the schema for MongoDB. So when you start when you run the application with the typegoose and everything connected to the to MongoDBs, the Mongo database will actually create all of these collection for you.
Yeah.
Right now.
So yeah, I think it's interesting to note that by default, Mongo doesn't really have the concept of schema, right? There's a collection, and anything you throw at it will be stored and will be able to retrieve. So basically, what you do here is you take it from being a simple dumb store to adding more strict typing
structure to it. Yeah, because I was working at the .NET shop, and then we pick up Netgas with the .NET Core API background. So we would
Right.
like to have things structured, and like TypeGoose and Mongoose and TypeGoose allows that.
And then, so if we circle a little bit to this .NET shop, what were you using as a database in a common setup SQL Server?
MongoDB still.
As well. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, interesting. And then for .NET, you have a similar way to handle Mongo.
Yep. They do have a .NET driver, which is super cool.
Okay.
Very cool driver for C# space.
Right. But it gives you typing to Mongoose to your Mongo as well.
Correct. Correct.
Awesome. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so here inside your post module, you inform TypeGoose like, hey, this module has a model named post with
Yep.
this schema.
Yep. And of course, I mean, because it takes in an array, so you can always have like all the models that related to post.
Yeah, right. Let's say I have post image
Yep.
or post tag that's related to post.
Yep. You can put it here. Absolutely.
Perfect.
All right. So now I'm going to go into my post model. So you see how to set it up. So at first you can see that my post extends a base class. So we're going to look at the base class after we look at all of these. So first of all, I have the use Mongoose plugin. So if you have knowledge about Mongoose, you know, Mongoose have a plugin based, so you can add additional features to Mongoose. And my Mongoose plugin is actually just a custom decorator that I have auto-populate and lean virtuals. I don't really want to get into these, what these do, because it's not very relevant to the topic. But just know this auto-populate will auto-join, if you know the join term. So auto-join my model if I have a reference or relationship in my model.
Yeah, so this has to do with basically MongoDB not being a relational database. But if you want to have a similar experience, you can have MongoDB populate your relations for you.
Yep.
So you don't have to do like various database calls to get the related data.
Correct. Under the hood, this still actually like run a join basically. So it's not like increase the performance, but it's just a way to abstract all of that repetitive operations for you.
Right. Yeah.
So that I have that. So like my post model will have these plugin applied, and then I have the prop decorator. So this is the TypeGoose way of providing the schema for Mongoose. So instead of like doing schema, we just hey, there's a text, field text of type string, and that's the prop. So that's
Right.
what prop does. Oh, sorry. And then underneath you see automap. So this is from Automapper, which we will go into. We will look at these when we get to the Automapper part.
Perfect.
And then next I have the author, comments, and light by. You will see there's a ref. So the ref is the TypeGoose concept of a relationship. So here I just say, okay, this author is a reference to the user. So in MongoDB, you have two ways to store the relational data. One is embedded data. So that's like nested object in JavaScript. The second way is to use a reference. So you can just store the ID, and then when you fetch, you can actually populate from that ID the whole object related to that ID. So that's what the auto-populate does for me.
Right. And having it a reference by ID prevents you from having duplicate data.
Yes.
Yeah. Makes total sense.
So this is my post model, and let's look into the base. So base is just an abstract class with all the created add, updated add is active in ID. So these why are these on base? Because when MongoDB create your document, when you create a new document in MongoDB, these fields will be auto-populated for you. And with is active, I actually set it default to true. So this is to support for soft delete, but it's just extra information at this point.
Yeah, but this is something that you add to the base class, and it will get persisted to any of these.
Yep, to every other models. And then I have the base DTO. So I have a, you see that I always have a model and then the detail of that model. So the detail is what I use to expose to the front end, which means the Swagger.
Yeah.
So on the model, I have prop, which is the entity in my database. But on the detail, I have these prefix API decorators from Swagger. So this is to annotate these fields to be exposed on Swagger. That's by using the API property over here.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
All right, now see the post, you see the base. Let's look at the post service real quick. So the post service is just any other service, and it extends the base service. So you look into the base service, it's just a wrapper around the model from MongoDB. So if you're familiar with the repository pattern, and which is very famous in the .NET Core space, you have the repository layer, which is your persistent layer that you talk to the database and everything. So here, my Mongoose or Typegoose model, I take the Typegoose model as my repository layer already. So I cut off that repository layer. I just have the service, and on my service, I will have a couple of default options. Like by default, I want every query to have autopopulate to be true. But if I choose to, I can have some queries to say, hey, I don't want to populate that field because it doesn't make sense to have that field populated. So I don't have to do that join.
Yeah.
So just wrap all of these file one with the options that I pass in. So that's the base service.
Yeah. And here you basically abstract everything that's
Yep.
Mongoose, right? So as of this point on, you just worry about Nest.js services and you don't have to think about any Typegoose specific stuff.
Correct.
Yeah, very good. Very clean.
Yep.
I like that.
Yep. And then in the post service, in the constructor, because we say Typegoose the full feature post, so we have that post model available for dependency injection. So inject model from Netgas Typegoose, and you can pass in a model, that's it, and it will return you the model type of post. And then you use the post model and pass that into your abstract class. So now you have everything available for you with type safety.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Right. So again, in here, just to set up all the not API call, all the database call to get your post, to get the post by user, all of your queries, and then on return, I use Mapper, which is a Netgas library, Automapper, that I wrap around my Automapper library that provides you a decorator to inject the mapper to the injectable in Netgas, so that you can call this .mapper array, and then you can map from TL or from the source model to the destination model, which we get into after we see the demo.
Awesome.
And then on the control, keep going.
Yeah. So because this is where you basically do the mapping, as you said, between the actual thing that comes from the database, which is called post, and the DTO, which is what gets exposed to the front end or to the end user, if you will.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now let's look into the post controller. So the post controller is what the Swagger module will look into. It's not going to look into your service at all. It will just look into your controller.
Yeah.
And here the controller decorator is from Netgas Common. So this is the way you set up the controller in Netgas. These API prefix decorators are Swagger specific. So first of all, I have the API tags. That's give me these tags right here with post.
Yeah.
And then you can have like multiple controller with the same tag. So it will get all of your endpoints will get populated under the tags. And then I have the para auth. I'm going to skip the API errors for now, which I'm going to get back later. Mm-hmm. And then the API bearer auth, which is annotate all of these endpoints with that. Basically, you can put this on each endpoint
individually.
Yep. Or you can just pay a whole controller to be protected. Right. There is no way right now. So in .NET, we have better off on the post controller. And then on the one that we don't want to have protected, that we don't want protected, there's a one calling anonymous, but we don't have anything like that in Netgas right now.
Right. Yeah, but that would be the way to exclude it. And I think with the grouping, you could also have like a public post and a private post controller, right?
Yeah.
Authenticated requests versus none.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So let's just look at the get endpoint here. So it's just a basic get, and I just call my service to get all the posts. And this is the decorator that tells Swagger, so hey, this endpoint will return me a type of post detail, and it is an array. So this will return me an array of post detail, and this is a way to let Swagger knows what the type, what the return type of this endpoint. So if you look into the Swagger UI of this get API, and you can see the schema of this 200. So the API OK response will actually give you the 200 status code. And then there's also an API created response will give you the 201.
Right. Yeah.
So this one right here, you can see it is an array of post DTO. And in here, you can just explore all the model, the model that gets returned to you, which is over here.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think this already shows a little bit that in contrary to popular opinion, you can do related data in REST. A lot of people say that, like, okay, GraphQL, because it's hierarchical, but you can do similar thing in Swagger over REST, if you will, if you design it correctly. So that's awesome to see.
Yep. I think my user information detail was from our previous session, so I'm gonna just restart my server real quick.
Yep. We did a trial run before, so we had a look at this, and then yeah. Okay, cool. So we took a look at your data storage, about how you abstracted Mongoose, and now how we present it to the outer world.
Yep. Let's just rerun this to see if it actually works. Yeah. So give back all that field. Yeah. Let's just try this out. See the data return. So this is my data right here. Right, right there, and this is my database of post. Let me know if the font size is too small. Okay. I don't know how to increase this font size of this as of this moment. So as you can see right here, I have the ID of the post, and then the comments and the author is just the ID. But when I fetch, the API returns me all of the information from that ID. Yep. Right here.
Yep. Yeah, so again, you can do this on REST as well, where you fetch an item with the relationship in the same go, and not have the dreaded excuse where people are like, yeah, but if you do REST, you need to first fetch the posts, then fetch the comments, and then fetch each author of the comment. There's ways around this.
Yep, like all the ORM or ODM will actually do all this for you if you set it up. All right, now let's get into why Automapper and what is Automapper really. So as you can see, you start seeing like all the DTOs. Like, why do you have to have DTOs? Why cannot you just use the post model directly? Well, for post, like all or nothing really. Let's say confidential. It doesn't really matter. It matters what you want to expose to the user. But let's say if I don't have the user DTO or any DTO, and I return a user. On my user, actually, there's a password field, or maybe someone has like a Google OAuth ID or something like that related to their security. Right. I don't want to expose that to the front end, even though in my code, I'm not going to use those fields, but those fields will still be exposed through the request explorer, XHR Explorer on the Chrome Dev tool, so anybody can actually see my data. Yep. That's why in the .NET Core space, we have the view models concept, which we expose view models. Over here, we have DTO, so data transfer object is the same deal. And then because now we introduce another layer, another DTO layer, so we have to have a way to map between the entity to the DTO. What you normally do is inside of your DTO class, you would have maybe a static static method, let's say from post, and maybe you have another one from like from something else. And so you have like multiple static method to map from one model to this model before you return.
You take then the source as an argument.
And this is getting very, very like poison.txt. You have to like remap manually everything.
Yeah. Right.
So that's where AutoMapper comes into play.
To prevent having to write all the mapping. Because I think oftentimes maybe 80 or 90% of the fields you actually do want to expose, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So now let's look at the Nork Map Library. Again, it is an object-to-object AutoMapper, but because it is very close to the original .NET AutoMapper, it's very close, not quite there yet because of TypeScript and C#, but because it's so close, so it requires these automapping is actually by convention. So I state that right here, by convention. Right. So what do I mean by convention? So let's look back into the model. We see on my post detail, I have a text, author, and comments. And then on my model, I have the same field name with text, author, and comments, but with just different models. So this one is user on the detail. This one is user information detail. So by setting up that convention, AutoMapper can actually work automatically. That's where the auto part comes in, right?
Right.
Automatically map conventionally matching fields.
Right. Otherwise, it would just be mapper.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now why AutoMapper? Again, as I said, I worked with .NET Core API before, so we have AutoMapper. The .NET AutoMapper in .NET is super powerful. It's like the OG one because of the reflection capability of C# is so strong.
Right.
Than the one in TypeScript. And then in the TypeScript space, you have a lot of other like mappings libraries, like class transformer is one. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, it's class transformer is a mapping library, but class transformer work on the self model. What it means by that is on the user, you want to expose a certain field, you just say, hey, expose it, and then you still return the user. At compilation time, that field you expose still be exposed on Swagger, but that field will be excluded. Sorry, exclude, not exposed. Will be excluded at runtime by class transformer. So that's not what we want. We want two separate models.
Yeah.
The next one is AutoMapper TS. So this is the original one in TypeScript space. It's a long time ago. It's last published 3 years ago.
Right.
So it's not maintained anymore, but I took a lot of inspiration from this one. So shout out to Bert.
Awesome. A Dutchie, fellow Dutchman. That's always good to see.
Okay. Another one is Morphism. So if you know math, right. there's a Morphism library, and I think this one is super cool. If you work with JavaScript, I think Morphism is more suitable than AutoMapper. Because
it works without decorators, I assume?
Yep, it works. You give it a schema of the source, mm-hmm. Then of the destination, I'm sorry. You give it a schema, and then you just provide a source object, and we'll map to the destination object based on that schema.
Right. One other thing I think we didn't really mention, but is a concept in a loosely typed environment like JavaScript. If you actually get something back from the database, it's just plain old JavaScript.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
But it's not an instance of user. Whereas, like in .NET, I'm not sure, but I'm coming from I've done Java in the past, and that's the same. Like if you get something back from the database, and if it's a user type, it's really the user object. So you will have any method that exists on the object, and you can execute these.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's another thing that you're basically providing, right? Where you make instances of the actual user DTO object.
Correct.
Awesome.
So how to set up AutoMapper with Netgas? As I mentioned, I have a wrapper, Netgas AutoMapper. Not this one. Let's see, Netgas X AutoMapper GitHub. So it's this one right here. So I have an Automapper wrapper for Netgas, which provides you with the module, with the decorator, and the inject mapper decorator, so you can work with dependency injection in Netgas. So to set it up, it's just Automapper module with mapper, and it takes in an option. So, oh, and I didn't mention this in our run through or dry run, is that I do support naming convention. So if you have like a naming convention of like a Pascal case convention, and then your destination is the camel case, you can support. You can like provide Pascal case naming convention for the sort naming convention. It will the Automapper know to map from like, let's say a cow to a cow, or a cow name to a cow name. So like something like that. Or if you come from Python background, I do support snake case naming convention. So I try to, I guess, go above and beyond.
Yeah.
So that's the naming conventions. Skip
cool.
Skip unmapped assertion. So some people actually Automapper will actually throw an error and crash your application if you have unmapped property. Okay. And in the .NET like typeset very strict space, when you have a mapping that does have some unmapped properties, eventually your application will break because of unmapped properties. So in Automapper in .NET, we'll throw an error and crash your application if there's any unmapped. But in JavaScript, in TypeScript, I understand the dynamic of JavaScript, so I provide like a Boolean flag so you can skip the unmapped assertion, so it won't crash your application.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think the theory in the Automapper from .NET is like you either need to explicitly ignore it, like your password field, or handle it, but we cannot have stuff that's dangling around.
So to answer the question, Bram, so your user has the password field, but your user DTO doesn't have it. But when you do a map, when you create a mapping between the user and the user DTO, because on the user DTO doesn't have that password field, so it's not an unmapped because it's never there. It's not going to get mapped either way because it's never there on the DTO.
It's from the other way around. If I add a property on the DTO that doesn't exist, that's not handled.
Yep. So I'm going to get into that. I'm going to like go back to your question when we get to the profile.
Cool. Yeah. Let's go. Yeah.
The next one is throw error. So the throw error flag is for you to use with the HMR, the hard module reload when you use the Nest CLI application. So a lot of people like told me that the HMR will save the profile, will not like destroy all the profiles. So I have a check to check that you cannot add two profiles to the same mapper instance. So we throw the error, but this throw error actually a way to the Automapper internally handle the error by console warning or throw error.
Right.
And then I have a use undefined. So by default, either null or undefined. So it cannot be both, and that is one of the issues that I have right now, that I have open right now. So why I have use undefined? So by default, the Automapper, when you have a mapping configuration between two fields, and if the field on the source model is falsy, I will map a null value, default to null value to the destination field. But because we all know that sometimes null doesn't work as well, because some like serialization, like JSON.stringify, for example, will strip out undefined, but will not strip out null.
No, it will give you a string of null, right?
Yep. So now use undefined is to, instead of like defaulting to null, it will defaulting to undefined. So that's just another option. So that's with mapper. The next one is you will see that I have import to the mappings right here. What the mappings does is it will contain all of my profiles. Why do I have it this way? So let's look at the profile right here. So I provide a decorator called profile from Netgas Automapper. So this decorator will automatically add this profile to this Automapper instance. And all you have to do is to make sure TypeScript runs the code.
Right.
So that's why I have the import right here to import all the profiles to make sure TypeScript runs this profile decorator.
All right. Yeah, because I think for some people who are not aware with decorators, these, if I'm correct, these run at compile time once, and they make the information available to runtime.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it has to be in the bundle. Basically, it has to be looked at by TSC or whatever compiler you use to be executed. So if I don't have this here, all of these profiles will never be executed.
Yeah, because you don't reference it at any point, so it doesn't get included in the bundle. Yeah, that makes total sense.
So in the profile, so what is the profile? In Automapper, we have a concept of profile, which is a way to separate your concern. Like you can separate all of the mapping configuration out to a separate place. So you have like this nice separation of concern where you have all the mapping logic. But most of the time, we have a bugs that is, hey, the data is not right. 90% of the time is the mapping error. So we can just look into the mapping place for the models in question and just debug it real quick.
And this specific mapper, so we're talking about the post DTO, is what we're basically appending fields to work to.
I'm sorry?
This profile, what it does, it adds fields to our post DTO, right? Or it basically provides.
It's not add, but is provide a configuration, basically a way. We tell Automapper how to map these fields.
Yeah.
On the post DTO. So I have a post profile. Post profile, basically all the mapping relating to post, anything related to post, we put into post profile. The first thing is you're gonna have like mapper.create map. You pass in the source model, and you pass in your destination model, and this will create a one-way mapping. So this will create a mapping from post to post DTO. If you want to have a reverse map, if you want to have like the other way, the other direction, Automapper does have the reverse map. So this one we create a mapping from post DTO to post. And why is this helpful? Sometimes on these updates endpoint, on the put endpoint, you might want to pass in from the front end the whole DTO. Yeah. And you can use this mapping to map the DTO from the post DTO to the post without doing any mapping manually. So this is a reverse map. However, because of the TypeScript reflection capability, I cannot support like fully fleshed out reverse map. There's some caveats there. That's why I rarely use it.
But somebody would be able to say a similar post profile like this, but on line 10, where you swap around post DTO and post. Would that work?
Absolutely. But if you do that, I'd rather just have reverse map, and then after reverse map, instead of for member, you will have for path, and for path is basically we'll look at the field on the post instead of the post DTO. Yeah. So now let's say I have let's say the text. So when I map from post DTO, post DTO to post, and for text on the post, I want to say, hey, d.text, and I want to add something. Let's say like that. So when I map from post to post DTO, the text is kept the same. But when I map from post DTO back to post, I want to add D3 exclamation mark. So that's totally up to you. And yes, what you said is also true, Bram. You can always have a mapper.create map for post DTO to post. Yes.
Yeah. Very cool.
Oh, and by the way, if you try to have a create map and then you have another create map with the same pair, Automapper will throw an error. You can only have like each pair is unique.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
All right. Now back to unmapped assertion and what your question. So you can see that the comments count and lie by count. So on my post, you don't have that properties. But on the post DTO, you have those properties. So now if I don't have this one right here, now I have two unmapped properties. I have the unmapped comments count and unmapped light by.
Right.
So let's just see if actually throw an error. Let's restart my, so it's not throwing any error right now.
Do we have this strict mode enabled? We don't.
I might not. So let's just to skip to false. I might uncomment the code out in the library itself. So it's fine.
Okay, yeah, but this is the place where you normally get an error like, hey, you say you want to have comments count on the DTO, but I don't know how to handle it.
Yep, that's true. So for comments count, I just say, hey, I want to map from the source. And this source is actually typeset to the post. So everything is typeset. And the typings for Automapper is one of the things that takes a lot of time, like the most time for me.
Yeah.
So for member, you can just say, hey, for what field, comments count. See that everything is typeset for you. Comments count, I say I want to grab the length of the comments array from the source.
Yeah.
And the same thing for light by count. So this is how you set up the configuration for mapping from post to post DTO.
Now, what I see in this example here, in this profile where we map from the database post to the DTO, is that this comment count depends on data that's actually on the original thing we retrieve from the database.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to do a asynchronous call? Because you might have a separate count query, maybe.
Yes, I'm gonna do that. Actually, there's no right now, but there's a way around it. You know,
right? Okay.
JavaScript. So let's say that, okay, I want to asynchronously grab some comments for the comments count. First of all, what you have to do is you have to ignore it first. So by default, I want to ignore it.
Okay, interesting.
So now, first thing, you have to ignore it. Say, okay, mapper, when you see comments count, don't do anything.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to handle it myself. So I provide a map callback. So you have after map, and then in after map you have the source and destination and also mapping. What we want is the destination. We don't really need the source. So on the destination right here, you can actually have this callback to be async.
Right. Yeah. And here you can do magic.
And then in here you can do magic.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah. Let's not further interrupt you, but yeah, this is something I was wondering.
And it's super flexible in the sense that so let's say now you want to like inject some service from outside, right? You don't need this. Have your service in here, and then you have to somewhere in the code, basically in main.ts, grab the mapper, grab the service, and then call mapper.addProfile. So something like this. Mapper.addProfile, and then you have to new that profile up yourself, and you can pass in your service.
Right. Yeah. Construct the whole dependency injection yourself.
Yep. So here's what we do. So destination. So this one, the map callback is actually mutate the original argument here. So you can actually do comments count and you do await something.
Yeah.
Right here.
That's
one way for after map. Comments of length. All right.
awesome.
Now you can see now back to my post DTO and my post model. So on my post DTO and post model, it has text, author, comments, and light by. Also on my DTO, I have text, author, comments, and light by. You can see that I do not set up anything, any configuration here for those four fields, but Automapper knows automatically to map those fields accordingly to the information that you provide with the automap. So for author, so for like primitives, you don't have to provide anything because under the hood, I use reflect metadata to figure out the type of this. But for like these nested model, you have to provide a type function to, hey, what model of this field is. So this author on the post is of type user. On my DTO, the author is of type user information DTO. And then in my user.profile, I set up a mapping for user and user information DTO. So when mapper, when my automapper when automapper try to map the author on the post DTO, it will say, okay, I have the user information DTO. I know this is my destination. I need to look for my source. And on the post, that is the source. So I have the destination and the source. I have to look for the mapping between the source and the destination. If I find that, I will map it. It will not. If I don't find it, it will say, hey, it's missing mapping configuration, which I can show right now. Back to user profile, I can say, hey, stop mapping that.
Error-driven development.
Yep. So now I go back to my Swag UI and I try to execute this. You see that it is thrown in internal server error.
Yeah.
And it will say right here, so mapping not found for user and destination user information DTO.
Yeah, it cannot map it. So what you provide in this user profile is basically some two-way, basically lookup table if you want.
Mm-hmm.
If you find something called user information DTO, know that in fact it's this user object.
So now when I provide the mapping again, when I map, it will be able to map to the user information detail. And I know it is user information detail because there's no password on here.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the whole thing of auto mapping. Just make sure that you have convention between these fields so that all the auto mapping will be done for you.
I can imagine this specifically works for larger size apps. Let's say you have like 30 or 50 models. This is going to be super helpful because you're never going to keep track of everything.
Yep, and for when you create a map, you can actually provide like a base mapping. So let's say I have a map between a user and user DTO, and all of my other maps is somewhat related to these two maps. And maybe on here you have a bunch of form member, like 10, 15 form members, which is long, and you don't want to repeat it. You can actually provide a pair of source, a base source and base destination, so something like this. You can actually do this as any for now. So you can do this, and AutoMapper will take the mapping from this pair and applies that on top of this pair.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, very cool. And so I think one of the things you're providing here inside your post profile is, if you can hop back to this post profile, we basically say we have a virtual field comments field. The field doesn't exist in the database, but we do want to provide it to the front end.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think this is what in GraphQL land would be a resolver field, where you resolve one field. This is basically your way around it. And one thing that I've really liked using, in the database, I store first name, last name as two separate fields because I want to be able to address people with my first name. But in my front end, I don't care. Like 90% of the time, I don't care. I just want to provide a display name or a name.
Yep.
And I think this is one nice place to keep all these things.
Yep. One really cool thing that I really want to show before we get into the generation part is that, so I want to show my common profile. So you can see a common profile is just, again, very basic. You map from common to common DTO. And let's look into common first. So in common, you can see that I have a post, which is a relationship with the post. And in my common DTO, I have post ID. And I don't set anything. I don't set anything about post ID for my mapping between common and common DTO.
Right.
But when I fetch, I can still have that post ID. So this works. The way it works is called flattening. It's automatically flattened from post.id to post ID.
Interesting.
So now let me show you a quick one. So I'll go back to my user profile on my user information DTO. Actually, my post DTO. So instead of like the author, let's say instead of author, I would say author name, string, author location, string, and I will do automap on this one, and also API property. So Swagger knows. So now I have these, right?
Yeah.
Save that, and let's try execute. And you see on my author, I can have author name and author location automatically flattened.
Flattened, you say? I'm not familiar with that term.
Flattened.
Flattened. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Flattened. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. I probably would call it denormalize.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, same idea. I love this.
So yep. So you have to basically you have to provide like that author, and then the name on the user information DTO, or on the user actually .name will be automatically mapped to the author name right here, because the field is conventionally matching.
Yeah, very cool.
Yep, and this also works with like I guess naming convention. So let's say if you have like an author location, then it will be mapped from author.location if you set up the snake case convention.
Right. Yeah.
So let's just go back to my user. All right. So now let's get into the generation for the front end. Now that we have the Swagger and we know our API response with all the mapping apply responses, so that we know that we have what we need for the front end.
Yeah.
And as you also have the .json Swagger specification or JSON file, any open API or Swagger generation tool will actually expect this JSON file, or sometimes it's in YAML.
Yeah. You
can just provide this JSON file to that tool, and that tool will be able to generate all sorts of things depending on the tool. What I'm using, we call NSWAG. Again, the NSWAG libraries from my .NET Core experience, we use a lot. We use everything Swagger with NSWAG. And for NSWAG, it actually can text in the OpenAPI specification, which is that swagger.json file, and will generate TypeScript client. It can generate AngularJS, Angular 2, Fetch, or even Axios. So you can, if you have a React TypeScript front-end application, or even React Native. I actually use NSWAG for one of the React Native TypeScript app that I worked on. Mm-hmm. And here we're going to use the Angular 2. So how to set that up is, first of all, you can install NSWAG as a dev dependencies in your project. So just run npm install NSWAG or yarn add NSWAG. And then second thing is you set up a script. So this is just to help you run it easier. Yeah. So NSWAG and then the NSWAG command. Normally you can just do NSWAG run. Mm-hmm. Because I have some, because NSWAG is a .NET library, so it depends on the .NET runtime.
Right.
So you have to, I have some conflict between my .NET Core runtime version, so I have to do this explicitly. The next thing is you have to provide a JSON file. You can call it anything you want. It can be any name you want. It's just a JSON file. Mm-hmm. And in here, you provide all of the information that NSWAG needs to know to generate your front-end code. And here I say, hey, from this URL, which is my endpoint with the JSON flag. So this gives me the Swagger.json specification. Mm-hmm. And then I specify the code generators from OpenAPI to TypeScript client. Again, this is NSWAG in the .NET space. So if you have a Xamarin Forms application, a front-end application written in C#, like Blazor or Xamarin Forms, you can have an OpenAPI to C# client.
Yeah, and you can just, this is a map, so you can add more things to code generators. So
Yeah.
you can generate several things at the same time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, so here you just specify all of the options that Nswag is going to look into. So here to say, oh, what is the class name of the services that it's going to generate? To say, hey, map to the template of controller. I specify the TypeScript version. I specify the template. Here you can actually put in Axios if you want to generate Axios. So that's just Angular. And the HTTP class is HTTP client. It's from before, so it used to be HTTP. If you have like credentials, you can do credentials for cookie-based authentication. The singleton provider, we know the provided in root. So this is the flag to turn that on for provided in root.
Right.
RxJS version. The version here, the version number here is very arbitrary. If it's like greater than 6, it uses the pipe approach.
Yeah, the lettable operators.
Yep.
Yeah.
The datetime type, you provide date or a moment.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Let's
And
not do that at this point.
And then the red is just very, very default. You can have nswag. I think nswag grade. You can run nswag grade. It will recreate that nswag JSON for you. And this is one important thing. Is the operation generation mode. And I say multiple clients from operation ID. So if you look into my operation ID. So under the paths, I have the operation ID for each endpoint, and that is actually the class name, the controller name, and the method. So Nswag, if you set up the multiple clients from operation ID, it will actually look into that operation ID and will grab this part as the controller and this part as the method name. So that's why I put the class name as controller right here. So for this one, it's actually generate a security controller for me.
Yeah.
So that's controller. Type style, you can have interface or you can have class if you want to work with class, or if you want to extend the generated models in your code base, you can do class. I use interface so that I can strip out all of the interfaces at runtime, so I don't have to add these to my bundle size.
Yeah.
And because imagine in larger or real applications, you can have bunch of models, like a lot of models, and that's going to add up to the bundle size a lot.
I've had this same thing with the GraphQL generated SDK. At some point, I got creative and I started generating my whole NGRX store with all the information, but for each of the models. And I had like 0.5 MB on only SDK generated code. And this was like, okay, I need to do something else here.
Okay.
Yeah. And just a quick question for enum style, you can pick enum. What's the other one? Just an object with a map?
I don't know. I never messed with this one, to be honest. Yeah, we're going to have to look into the documentation. But yeah. Next thing is the base URL token name. This is the it's basically Nswag's going to generate an injection token for you so that you can provide the base URL, which you get from the environment files or environment variables based on the environment that you deploy your application to, and provide this API-based URL to these generated service, so the service knows which base URL to look at.
Yeah, very cool. So you don't have to hard code your URLs and regenerate it when you want to.
And the last thing is the output, or where you want to put the generated file. And one thing to note is the Nswag will generate all of your controllers, all of your endpoints into one file. All right, so let's look at the apps right now. So let's look into the web API stuff. And this is where I have the generated code to be generated. So you can see it auto-generated by Nswag. And this is the API base URL injection token. And this is used on the app module right here. So you provide that at the top level, and then you can just use your environment API URL.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yep. And this is the security controller that I mentioned. This graph from the operation ID, and the register is from operation ID as well. And it will just like it generate all of the DTO even from the params, and on the model, the result model as well. So for token result DTO, it would just generate everything for you for like user information detail right here with all that fields for you.
Yeah, awesome.
All right,
Yeah,
so
this saves you from a lot of manual typing and thinking about like how to provide HTTP client to where to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And to use, you just use this as an Angular service. So you inject that controller into your service, and then you call the method, and the parameters is actually type self. So you can see that it's body login params DTO. You have to pass in the right self, the right shape of data.
Yeah.
All right. Another thing is how to change the model on the back end, and then have that sync on the front end. Let's just do that real quick. It's very easy. You just go back to your backend. So I'm going to go to my user information DTO over here. So let's just try it out again. So you can see right here on the author on my post, I have these created ad, updated ad, and is active. So this is just to let's say this is just to display the avatar of the post. So I don't really need these information. So let's go back to my user information DTO right here, and I say extend space DTO. Let's say I don't want to extend it anymore. I still want to have the ID. So I just copy those and paste here and save. Now my backend is rerun. My Swagger, all my models is rerun. So now let's look into the Swagger UI again. I no longer have the created ad. And what you have to do is just rerun your nswag. So I'm going to run npm run nswag, and I have to hit run. And we regenerate nswag with JSON, and we go back to web API stop and go to my user information DTO. You see that all that created ad is gone.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think we don't have the front end yet to show this, but if at any place you were depending on the created ad field in user DTO, now your Angular compiler will start complaining, or TypeScript in your Angular setup will start complaining like, hey, you're using from...
I think we lost him.
Hello, I'm back. I'm so sorry, everybody.
That's fine.
I'm not best connection, so sorry interruption.
Yeah, and I think we're at the end of the stream anyway. So I think that's all I had to show.
Yeah. It's super interesting, and I'm glad to come here and show it. I've been impressed with the project when I looked at it seems well done, good, or at least that I read. It does a great job explaining why not, which is, I think, a very fair point, because people generally, if you show something like this, go ahead.
I mean, the Automapper even in the .NET or in general, is very, very opinionated. Like you have to follow a certain structure, like convention. Like it enforces convention to be able to use Automapper or to be able to see the benefit of Automapper. If not, you will see you have a lot of like these decorator anyway. So, and talking about this Automap decorator, I know it's tedious, so I do have an Automapper transformer plugin. So with this Automapper transformer plugin does is actually it will scan all of the models that you provide, and it will create a static method at compilation time. So at runtime, the Automapper will look into these static method and will know the metadata of the models instead of using the Automap decorator. But transformers is experimental and it's very limited. So it requires some setup to be able to use this. So that's why I'm not recommending. But if you want to explore and you want to remove decrease the amount of boilerplate, you can use the plugin to have the Automap decorator removed.
Yeah, awesome. I think this might be some nice future follow-up if you and I can look into doing this, because the same thing is provided by, or a similar thing is provided by Nest.js itself for decorating Swagger and GraphQL fields. So that might be some nice follow-up at some point to look at this and how can you get rid of this? I think with a lot of solutions like this, people are like, oh, you can simply use X, and they don't really know what the details are or the benefits are of a certain pattern. And this is what I hope to achieve with show and tell, that people get some nice, nice place to show what they're worked on. And so with that, I think we're pretty much wrapping it up. So you can follow the link down here, and I'll also pop them in the description of the YouTube channel once I'll upload that. And you can follow Chau on Twitter, which is Nartzy1410, which I guess is your birthday.
It is. So which is, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, awesome. Well, belated congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And with this, I think I'd like to wrap it up. Is there anything you like to plug, or you like to show people or inform them?
Yes, I like to plug Swimland open sources libraries. So
awesome. Yeah.
Ngx charts, which is completely D3. It uses D3 to render your chart under the hood. Very popular charting libraries in the Angular space. Also, there's Ngx Data Table. It's one of the first data table that implement the virtual scroll. So because Swimland products have to show millions of records, so we have Ngx Data Table to provide a lot of performance and UX for the customers. And a bunch more Ngx Swimland open sources that you might want to check out if you go to github.com/swimland.
Awesome. I can definitely second that. They have high quality libraries. So.
Oh, and talk about that under Ngx UI. Actually, it is a common UI library that we use in our products. So if you think those looks nice, feel free to take a look and contribute. Under Ngx UI, there's also a split component, and I think I can take a look at your Angular split, Bram, and to improve that for
Awesome, super nice. Well, thanks a lot. I totally second these picks because Swimlane has done some awesome stuff. I think Austin McDaniel worked with Swimlane a few years back, and he was always promoting and improving this stuff. And I think Marianne is another one of the developers there.
He's the engineering manager now. He's
very cool. He's still there with Swimlane.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, high quality stuff. Check it out. Anybody checking this, if you want to be on show and tell, give me a ping on Twitter or on the Angular Discord, wherever you find me. Super happy to host you. Chau, I hope you'll be back at some point, and thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. That's a wrap. Bye-bye.
Bye.